a specific kind of lie that is not really a lie. It doesn't deceive anyone about facts. It doesn't take anything from anyone. It manufactures a loss that didn't happen in order to explain an emptiness that did. I have done this. Most people I know have done some versions of this. And Girard has a name for the mechanism underneath it. Girard's theory of the scapegoat works like this. When a community is in crisis, when internal tension and mimetic rivalry become too intense to contain, the group doesn't resolve the tension internally. It directs it outwardly. A single figure is chosen, blamed for the disorder, and expelled or disobeyed or destroyed. The community experiences temporary relief, unity, the sense that the source of the problem has been identified and removed. Except the source was never the scapegoat. The source was the mimetic desire itself, the rivalry, the borrowing, the tension that builds when everyone wants through everyone else simultaneously. Now, what I want to talk about is what happens when you run this mechanism privately, not against the community, but against yourself, when the wound has no clear origin, when the emptiness is real but shapeless. And the mind does something very specific. It manufactures a story, a specific loss, a named person, a moment when it all began, because a wound with a story can be mourned. A shapeless absence can only be endured. I have invented people, not in the way of a novelist, not deliberately, not for art, in a way of someone whose absence felt impossible to explain, giving them histories, significance, deaths, not to manipulate anyone, not even really to be believed, but because saying there is a specific kind of presence I have never had, and I don't know what to do with that, is nearly impossible. Saying someone I was close to died is a sentence that lands. People know what to do with grief. They don't know what to do with a formless need for something that was never there. The private scapegoat mechanism is the mind giving the wound an origin story, making the absence specific enough to carry. And the strange thing Girard reveals is that the story, even when false in its facts, is true, and often in its shape. The figure you invented tells you something real about what you actually needed. The lie maps the truth. It cannot say directly. Dostoevsky's underground man lies constantly. He knows he's lying. He watches himself lie. He hates himself for it. And then he keeps going. But his lies are not random. Every lie he tells is shaped like the self he wishes existed. The respected one, the feared one, the one with weight and dignity. The lie performs the self before the self has been built. And the underground man's real tragedy is not that he lies. It is that he sees through the lie. The moment it leaves his mouth, he confesses the mechanism inside the same sentence where he runs it. That simultaneously, confession and performance in the same breath, is what makes him the most honest character in the 19th century literature. Not despite the lying, because of it. The lie told about a shapeless wound is not a failure of honesty. It is the most honest form that kind of honesty can take. Because the wound is real. The story is just the only way the wound could be seen. Girard says the scapegoat mechanism only loses its power when the community can see the innocence of the victim. When they can look at the figure they expelled and say he was never the source. We redirected something onto him that belonged somewhere else. And the private version of this is harder because the figure you invented, the one you killed to explain the absence, who also is innocent. He wasn't the cause, he was the map, the truest map you had of what was actually missing. Seeing that doesn't make the absence go away, but it changes what you are carrying. You stop carrying a grief that has no real object, and you start carrying the actual thing, which is harder and realer, and finally, something you can work with. The wound is real. It just doesn't have a death certificate.